Hey everybody. During his presentation at Unreal Fest Orlando 2025, Dave from the motion design team over at Epic presented a new functionality set called Scene State. Now, what Scene State allows us to do is interactively control our motion design graphics, much in the same way as you see for scoreboards on major sporting events. And this adds a whole new level of interactivity to the way we can play out graphics in a broadcast scenario. Our previous functionality with Rundown allowed us to predefine various pages, but the Scene State system allows us to interactively change what's being displayed, when it's being displayed, as well as the content. And so this video is going to be an initial introduction into that functionality in Unreal Engine 5.6. So I have a very simple example put together here where it's just a basic scoreboard, a score on either side. We can show it, we can hide it, we can increase the number of points, and that gives one animation, and if we lower the points, we get a different animation, and of course we can hide this, and it's all being done interactively through Scene State. So that's what we're going to cover. This assumes you are already familiar with motion design in general, as well as a little bit about blueprints. And so I will share that in the dev community at the Unreal Engine Epic site, so devepicgames.com, I have a page there that I will link in the description, along with two tutorial series that I presented as labs back in 2024 at Unreal Fest Orlando. So the first one, Introduction to Motion Design. This course is going to introduce you to motion design functionality in general in Unreal Engine, if you need that. And then also there is the Blueprints for Motion Design, which introduces the concept of blueprints in general and is intended to be useful for motion design artists who are new to Unreal Engine and maybe haven't even heard of Blueprint before. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at those if you haven't gotten yourself familiar with those features, because in this tutorial we're going to be looking at how we use those features with a scene state context so that we can create interactive graphics. Now let's take a quick look at what this ends up looking like when we play these out in a rundown. So I've got a rundown already set up here. There's only one level. And I preview it in, and we should get nothing initially. And that's because my show controller is deactivated. So I can activate my show controller, and that'll play the animation that brings in the scoreboard. And then I have two values here. And now normally with Rundown, we'd have multiple pages, and each page would have different values, and we would do preview next, etc. to move beyond these pages. But instead, now I can enter a score here, number 6, and as soon as I hit enter, that previews. If I have a broadcast, the preview would run automatically as soon as I hit enter. I would hit F5 to send these updated values to the broadcast channels. So it's just one thing to note is that you are getting to see the preview instantly, but to push the result out to your broadcast, you would hit F5 so that that refreshes. Now I have two different animations, right? So if I change this to 7, you'll see that this animation has a little bit of a ghost number that expands to be really dramatic. But if that number was the incorrect value and a point gets taken away or something, if I enter a 6, it's a slightly different animation that doesn't have that ghost. And of course, all of this works on both left and right sides. And so this is the basic example that I'll show. And one last note is that I have saved these out into an SPAC file. So yeah, I'm going to stop all my pages and exit out of that. So these are saved into an SPAC that you can import into your own projects, and I will share those on my Discord server, which will also have an invite link in the description of this video. All right, so let's take a closer look at just how this is working. I have the Scene State score level open here, and that has all of the actors and animations and remote control values all set up. So if I go into remote control, for example, you can see that there's quite a few extra controls that are not showing up in Rundown. So in Rundown, let's bring that up again. I select the page, I've got 3 different values. And by the way, if I preview this in with show already checked, that should come in and it preserves those values. Some nice things about this, by the way, is I drop down, I can change a value down, I can change a value up, and all of that is still updating. And I just bring that back in. and we have the latest, greatest scores. So we only have 3 values for the operator to worry about here, but there are a few extra values listed here in the controls of remote control, as well as a number of different properties. So to be clear, these are not appearing in Rundown due to a new setting that allows us to hide remote controllers from the rundown. This allows us to be able to update controllers with blueprints or remote control commands from something like a Stream Deck using Bitfocus Companion, etc. By default, it's these 2 underscores as a suffix at the end of the controller name that is hiding them. Now, this is completely configurable, so if you go to Edit and Project Settings, then scroll down to Motion Design, you can click on Playback and Broadcast, and scrolling in here, you'll see that there is a playback settings under Playback Manager, and one of the sets of settings here we have is Ignored Controller Postfix. So by default, this should be in place in Unreal Engine 5.6, where there's 2 underscores. If I wanted to add another little code that I'm used to using in my studio, let's say hide, I could hit a plus sign here and just say underscore hide. Now, any controller that was named either double underscore or double underscore hide would be hidden from remote control. So let's just see that in action. For example, right now I have all 3 of these available. So I'm just going to go ahead and preview out, take that out, and close Rundown, and I'll just add underscore hide to the end of the right score. Then I'll go back over to my content browser, make sure I save that change, and then double click on my rundown again. Now when I click on this page, I only have the left score visible. So let's go ahead and bring that back. So we'll go ahead and close, go back to my remote control and just remove this underscore hide, enter, go back here, Control Shift S, we'll just save everything and double click. And there we go. We have both of our values available. Okay, so that is how we can hide values from the rundown controls. And when they're hidden, by the way, they are free to be updated by other blueprints and other processes so that, they're not going to get stomped on by the rundown system itself. All right, so that is how it looks in Rundown. Let's take a closer look at how this operates within the level itself. Now, to use this, we do need to have an extra pair of plugins loaded up. So let me go to Edit and Plugins and show those. And we'll search for Motion Design Scene. And here they are, Motion Design Scene State and Motion Design Scene State Integration. Both of these need to be on to use this feature set. They are not turned on by default in current 5.6.0 Motion Design template project or levels. You'll need to make sure that you go ahead and manually activate both of these. With that activated, you'll have a new button here, Scene State. Without those plugins, this button doesn't appear. With the plugins on, this button will be available for you for motion design levels, and then you can click it to open up the Scene State editor. Now, one thing to know is that the very first time that you click this button, it will also add an actor to your level. Let's see if I can scroll here back in the level, and sure enough, here it is. This is the Motion Design Scene State 0 actor. This gets added when this button is clicked for the first time for a motion design level, and this is intended to be an interface between the variables that you have in your scene state system. These are the exposed variables, right? So if I add a Boolean variable here, so demo full, and I compile and I save, nothing changes over here because I did not expose this variable. So this could be a variable that's used internally by the logic of this scene state. If I want this variable to be available for updating by remote control or the designer working in the editor, then I'll want to expose this variable with this open eye, and then when I compile, that variable is added and it can be edited in editor, or it can also be exposed to remote control so that it can be updated through that. So let's go ahead and delete this. We don't need that. And compile and save. You'll also note, for example, that in my current scene state actor, I have 3 of the variables exposed. There's show bar, there's left points, and there's right points. Now, these are variable values here in the system, but there's also 2 variables that are the text 3D actors that we're looking to update. So what will be happening is these variables are exposed to remote control, these points on the left and the right. And what we want to do in our scene state system is be able to activate a change in the state whenever the value in the variable gets changed relative to the actor that's actually being displayed. And so these variables exist so that the designer editing the level can go ahead and pick from the various actors in the level and say, yeah, I want the left score actor to be this actor. And so this is the one that we're comparing to anytime we're checking to see if the left score has changed. And likewise for the right score. So these variables allow for information to pass from the level into the scene state, as well as for us to be able to share variables with remote control. So let's see how all of that works. Here in the scene state editor, what I can do is run a debug mode so that you can see it operating live. When you first open this window, no debug object is selected. So you want to change this to say root state motion design scene state 0 selected. So this will create a debug state so that we can play in this debug view. Now you might not have the debug view by default. If you maybe open this up and you don't have the debug view, just go to the window menu and search out for, here we are, debug view. And I click that, and now I have the debug view. So with having this selected as well as the debug view open, what we can do is hit the play button, and now we're playing this in editor. Now by default, it's displaying all the actors. I can go ahead and turn it on and turn it off, and I'm still seeing all of the states as they happen. So let's take a close look at what's going on here. So all scene state systems start out with an entry point, and they need to lead to some state to start processing. In this case, I just created a state that's called idle. And with this, once you land within a state in the state system, essentially the system is constantly trying to escape from this state and get to another one. And we just need to plot paths to other states to get to, and then create a condition that satisfies essentially the permission to leave one state and get to another one. So while this is active, it's constantly exploring any outgoing paths and looking to see, well, is it possible for me to escape here? So every one of these wires has its own transition condition. So I can select this and I get a little pop-up that shows me what's in there. And if I double click, I can see it in more detail. And so what's happening is this show bar Boolean, it's either true or false, is directing whether or not a transition is permissible. I can use the back arrow here. So as a result, we have that variable exposed here in our debug object. And if I click on this and activate it, that will satisfy this condition, and we will move from this state to this state. And doing so will execute a number of actions. So these are my scene state actions. So we're using a delay here just so there's a moment to process things if we're bringing in the level for the very first time, and the checkbox for show bar is active. This gives a moment for all of the remote control variables to be applied appropriately. Then we make sure that we have the latest remote control values copied to our variables. So there is a controller and it is getting a value from our variables. So this way we can take our variables and put them into our controllers so the controllers match the variables. And finally, we play a sequence, and in this case we're playing the bar in sequence, and that should reveal the score bar. So I click on this, and let's just see right now this is active. When I activate this checkbox, we'll see this activate, and these 3 actions take place. And there we go. So we've played that in, and as soon as all of this was completed, we immediately went to bar showing as our state. And the reason for that is, well, this was the escape path available. And if I double click, we have can transition is always active. So this particular state, reveal bar, is just set up to do these 3 actions. And as soon as they're done, we're good to go and move on to bar showing. So now in bar showing, we are waiting for a change in the score. So the left points are either going to go up or down. If one of those conditions happen, and then we're going to take some other actions. So we can take a look at that in our condition. So we take our left score actor and our left points variable, and we run them through this score is up function, which is added here as a blueprint. So if I double click on that, you can see this is running. And so we're getting our score actor and our score input, and we're just comparing the values and checking to see if the score input is greater than the value that is coming in from the actor. Then yes, the score is indeed up, in which case we will go ahead and run our transition, our state for the score is up. So let's look at that. So we go, yep, the left points are up. We're going to play a sequence that will hide the score. Then we'll set our remote control values to match what our variable is. In this case, this is a left text. And you see that this has underscore underscore. And what this controller does is actually update the actors in view here. And then we play a sequence to reveal that. So let's just review that very quickly here. So we play a sequence that hides the actor. The next important step is we're updating a particular controller, left text underscore underscore. So if I set this aside for a moment, what we can see is there's a left text and a right text controller. They have the underscore underscore after them, so they are hidden from remote control. And if I select one of these, we can see what they do. And what turns out is they update the 2 actors that are text actors actually visible in the level. So when we update the left score remote control, we are not changing the actors. We're not changing anything that's visible. What we are instead doing is applying the new value to our remote control object, which is feeding this variable right here. So now what we want to do here is make sure that the value in the controller that's updating the visible text actor is the same as what we have in our variable. At this point, the 2 variables are equal, so that when we finish all of our actions, we'll be able to automatically go back to bar showing. And when we check this condition, this will not be true because the 2 values are going to be identical. That's not that the left points variable is greater than this, they're equal. So let's put that to the test. What will happen here is I'll put in a number of 3 into left points. This will be true. We'll be in the left point state, and there we are. We played everything, and then we immediately went back to bar showing, and since 3 matches the value in our actor, this is no longer true, so we don't get stuck in a loop. So likewise, our 3 other conditions operate much the same way, except that we do have a function for score is down, and here we've just reversed the comparisons. So if the displayed text actor has a value that's greater than the variable, then we need to animate our displayed actors, change their values so that they reflect the correct value that's in our variables. So going back here, if I set this to 2, then this will play, and it's a different animation. And so you can see the first animation is the same with both of these. So it's a pre-up hide. So basically we're hiding the actor by reducing its scale. Here again, we copy our variable value to the controller that adjusts the actual displayed text. And then the main difference here between going up and down is that going up, we play a left up show sequence, and going down, we just play the left up hide. And to be a little tricky, we play that backwards. So it's just the same animation to hide it, but it's going in reverse so that we reveal it again. And likewise, we have a set that matches on this side. So those are the core concepts here, is that once we're in any given state, we are trying to escape that state based on the condition for essentially an escape route wire being true. So as long as none of these wires, and in this case, bar showing has 5 different wires leading away from it. One is going to points up for the left, points down for the left is the second one. Right points down or right points up are exits 3 and 4. And finally, exit 5 is whether we want to hide the bar. And of course, in here, we're just reading out the show bar boolean. We perform a boolean not operation on that. So if bar is true, then not true is false. If bar is false, then not false is true. So if we uncheck this, that then opens the gate to escape through hide bar. Hide bar is automatically exited once it's done its work. And so we go back to idle. So I can hide the bar. We go to idle. And this is why we have our set remote control values here, because I could change the value, let's say of right points 3. And at this point, the right point value is different than what is applied in the controllers for the displayed actors. So when I show the bar, I want to take a beat. I'm going to apply the 2 variables to the remote controllers that are the displayed text, and then I'm going to reveal the bar. So go ahead and do that. And we have 2 and 3. So that is how scene state works. Now that you have an introductory overview of how scene state works, in the next video I'll provide a step-by-step tutorial on how to build this essentially from scratch. I hope this helps. Until next time, have fun.